I used to think peace was a sound, the kettle whistling at 6 a.m., the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the way sunlight hit the old oak floorboards through half-open blinds. After Margaret passed, those small things became my rhythm, my morning symphony. The house was quiet, always quiet, but not empty, not to me. It still carried her laughter in the walls, her perfume faint in the bedroom curtains. The neighbors thought I was lonely. Maybe I was, but to me this house wasn't loneliness. It was memory. I live in a suburb about 30 minutes north of Manhattan, a neighborhood full of trimmed hedges, polite waves, and families walking golden retrievers before school. I've been here for 32 years. Every crack in the driveway, every squeaky step on the back porch. I could tell you its story. After retiring from the Postal Service, I told Margaret I'd finally get around to painting the porch and fixing that gutter she'd been after me about. She smiled that knowing smile, the one that meant she didn't believe I'd ever do it. I did, eventually, but she wasn't around long enough to see it. Cancer. It doesn't give you much notice, and when it's done, it doesn't leave much behind. Either, just a man, a quiet house, and the echo of promises you didn't know would matter so much later. My son Daniel used to come around more often after she passed. He'd stop by with Chinese takeout or coffee, sit at the table, and talk about work, the finance firm, his long hours, the noise of the city. He was a city boy now, though he'd grown up in this house, born in that very upstairs bedroom. When he talked about his apartment in Brooklyn, his voice always lifted. He liked the energy, the people, the ambition. Me, I liked the calm. The difference between us was more than miles. It was pace. Daniel was 32 now, ambitious, successful, the kind of man who wears suits even when he doesn't have to. I was proud of him, no question about that, but there was something changing. His visits got shorter. Calls became text messages. Texts became, "Sorry, Dad, I've been busy lately." I told myself that's how life works. Kids grow up. They chase things. You let them go. But deep down, I missed when he'd sit on the porch steps with me, barefoot, eating ice cream straight from the tub, talking about baseball and girls he liked in high school. Now, when he did visit, it was usually for a reason, not just to drop by. Taxes, paperwork, the occasional favor. You start noticing those things when you're old enough to realize time isn't promised. It was a Tuesday when I got the call. I remember because Tuesdays were grocery days. I'd just come back from the store with milk, eggs, and a slice of apple pie I didn't need, but always bought anyway. The phone rang, an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me said, "Pick up." "Mr. Hayes," a woman's voice said, professional but hesitant. "Yes, this is he. This is Jessica from Wexler Realty. I just wanted to confirm you'll be ready for the open house on Thursday." There was a pause. "The what?" I asked. "The open house. For your property on Willow Lane. The paperwork says you've approved the sale listing." The silence stretched long enough for me to hear my own heartbeat. "Ma'am," I said slowly, "I think there's been a mistake." She hesitated, typing sounds clicking through the receiver. "It says here the owner's representative is a Daniel Hayes. That's your son, correct?" My stomach dropped. I felt the apple pie box slip from my hand and hit the counter. "Yes," I said, voice quiet now. "That's my son." She continued, oblivious to the weight of her words. "Well, he signed as power of attorney for the estate. Everything looks in order. We're scheduling viewings later this week. I think you should hold off on that." I interrupted, my voice steady, but low. "No one's selling this house. Not yet." When I hung up, I stood in the kitchen for what felt like an hour. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Outside, a car door slammed. I couldn't move. That night I called Daniel. Straight to voicemail. I left a message. Calm, direct. Daniel, it's Dad. Call me back as soon as you get this. It's important. He didn't. The next morning, I tried again. Nothing. By the third day, I stopped calling. Instead, I went to the city. Manhattan's noise hit me like a wave. Car horns, chatter, construction drills. It had been years since I'd come downtown. I followed the address I'd memorized from one of his Christmas cards, his office in a glass building that looked more like a mirror than a place for people to work. When the receptionist asked if I had an appointment, I said, "I'm his father." She hesitated, then picked up the phone. Moments later, Daniel appeared, suit, tie, phone in hand. "Dad," he said, half smiling, half confused. "What are you doing here? We need to talk," I said. He looked at his watch, then sighed. "All right, let's grab a coffee downstairs." At the cafe, I didn't waste time. "Daniel, did you authorize the sale of my house?" He shifted in his seat. "It's not that simple." "Then make it simple," I said. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Dad, look. You're sitting on property worth almost $800,000. You live alone? The maintenance is high. The taxes keep going up. So you sold it." I cut in. He met my eyes. "I'm trying to help you. You can't live in that house forever. It's too much for you." Without asking me first. Silence. Just the hiss of the espresso machine behind him. "You used my name," I said. "My home, the place you grew up in." He leaned forward, frustrated. "I didn't use you, Dad. You gave me power of attorney years ago, remember? When Mom was sick, you said you trusted me to handle things if anything happened." I remembered. I just didn't think anything included this. The rest of that conversation, it's a blur. I remember standing up, my coffee untouched, his eyes avoiding mine. I remember walking out into the cold November air and realizing for the first time in my life, I didn't know my own son when I got home. The for sale sign was already on the front lawn. That night, I sat on the porch, the same porch I'd painted years ago for Margaret, and watched the streetlights flicker across the driveway. A young couple walked by, holding hands. They smiled politely. I nodded back. Inside the house, every creak, every sound felt heavier than before. And for the first time since Margaret's funeral, I cried. Not because I'd lost the house, but because I'd lost Daniel. The next morning, the sun rose just like any other day. But it didn't feel like any other day. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the for sale flyer that someone had slipped into the mailbox. It had a picture of my house, my porch, my garden, my maple tree in the front yard, printed neatly under the bold letters. Charming 3-bedroom colonial. Perfect for young families. I read that line again and again. Young families. This house was built by one. Me, Margaret, and Daniel. Now it was just a piece of real estate to somebody else. That afternoon the realtor came by to check the property. Jessica, the same woman who'd called me earlier. She was polite, professional, maybe mid-30s, drove a shiny SUV and wore that kind smile you put on when you expect resistance. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "I'm sorry about the confusion the other day. Your son told us everything was cleared up." I nodded, though my jaw clenched. "Is that so?" She looked around the living room, clipboard in hand. "You've kept this place in amazing shape. Buyers are going to love it." I followed her gaze. Margaret's photos on the mantel, The old rocking chair in the corner, the stain on the carpet from when Daniel spilled grape juice at 5 years old. All of it. Soon to be someone else's. "Miss," I said quietly, "I don't think you understand. I'm not selling." Her smile faltered. "Well, legally, Mr. Hayes, your son has authority through power of attorney." "Legally," I interrupted, "this house has my heartbeat in the walls. That should count for something." She looked uncomfortable, adjusted her clipboard. "I understand, sir, but the paperwork is final. The open house is scheduled for Saturday." She handed me a printed sheet. Times, details, her business card clipped to the corner. When she left, I stood in the doorway watching her car drive off. Then I looked at that sheet, that lifeless piece of paper, and I made up my mind. If my son wanted to sell my house, then I'd be there to see it happen, with my own eyes. The days leading up to Saturday were heavy. I'd walk through each room, touching the walls, opening drawers, looking at things I hadn't looked at in years. Margaret's old postcards, Daniel's school trophies, a stack of photographs from a road trip we never finished. It was like saying goodbye, one memory at a time. On Friday night, I sat at my desk and opened an envelope I hadn't touched in almost 10 years. Inside was the copy of my deed. My name, printed clearly. I smiled faintly. Not yet, I thought. Not yet. Saturday came. By 9 a.m., cars started lining the street. Young couples in jeans and winter coats. Real estate agents holding clipboards. The smell of brewed coffee and open windows filled the air. From my car across the street, I watched. No one recognized me. Just another old man sitting quietly, watching a house he once built being paraded around like a prize. Jessica arrived, unlocking the front door. Balloons tied to the mailbox. A sign that read, "Open house today. Come in." I watched strangers walk through my home, pointing, laughing, imagining themselves inside my life. "Look at that fireplace. Oh, honey, this kitchen is perfect. I love the backyard. We could host barbecues." Each comment was a tiny cut. Then I saw him, Daniel, standing on the porch, dressed in a sleek gray coat, greeting visitors like it was his big day, smiling, confident, like none of this meant anything. Something in me snapped. I got out of the car, crossed the street, and stepped through that front door. Conversations froze. Jessica's smile faltered. Daniel's eyes widened. "Dad," he said, stepping forward. "What are you—" "Don't stop on my account," I said calmly. "I just came to see who's buying my house." "Who's buying my house?" A few couples politely excused themselves.
Daniel lowered his voice. "Dad, we talked about this."
"No," I said, looking around. "You talked. I listened. There's a difference." Jessica stepped between us, nervous. "Mr. Hayes, maybe we should—" "It's fine, Jessica," I said gently. "I won't cause a scene. I just want to be here." Daniel sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Dad, please, you're making this harder than it needs to be." "Harder for who?" I asked. "For you." He didn't answer. For the next hour, I stayed in the background, quiet. I watched him pitch the house like a salesman, talking about the neighborhood, the value, the charming vintage feel. When one couple asked about the age of the foundation, Daniel laughed lightly. "My dad built it himself. Solid as a rock. He said it like a sales point, not a memory. That's when I decided what I'd do." The bidding started that afternoon. Apparently there was more interest than expected. 4 families made offers. The realtor mentioned they might even go above listing price. I stayed quiet, unnoticed in the back. Then when it came time for the official auction bids, I raised my hand. Jessica looked surprised. "Sir, do you wish to place a bid?" Daniel turned sharply, disbelief in his face. "Dad, what are you doing?" I met his gaze calmly. "You wanted to sell my house, son. I'm just making sure the right person buys it." The room went silent. "Mr. Hayes,"
Jessica said softly, "the current bid is $780,000. Are you offering higher?" I nodded. $800. Daniel's voice cracked. "Dad, you can't." $800, I repeated. Whispers filled the room. Another bidder countered. $810, they said. I raised my hand again. $820. It went on like that for several minutes, my pulse steady, my mind sharp, until finally, going once, going twice. No one countered. Jessica looked around the room, then back at me. "Sold to Mr. Hayes." When it was over, Daniel was pale. Outside the street was quiet again. He followed me to my car, his voice trembling with frustration.
"Why would you do that, Dad?" he said. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I turned to him slowly. "You sold something that wasn't yours to sell." "It was for your own good," he shouted. "You can't live in that old place forever. You're stuck in the past. And you're too busy running from yours." He froze. The wind picked up between us, rustling the leaves on the pavement. "I'm not mad you wanted to help," I said softly. "I'm mad you forgot to ask if I wanted your help." His face softened for a second, then hardened again. "You just don't get it, Dad. This house is holding you back. Mom's gone. You need to move on." I looked back at the porch, the one Margaret loved to sit on every summer evening. "Moving on doesn't mean erasing what's left," I said. "It means learning to live with it." He didn't answer, just turned, muttered something under his breath, and walked away. That night the "for sale" sign was gone. I pulled it out of the ground myself, and as I sat on the porch, watching the sunset fade over the New York skyline, I realized something. The real house I needed to rebuild wasn't made of wood or brick. It was the one between me and my son. A week passed, then another, and Daniel never called. The silence between us became heavier than anger. I wasn't even sure what I wanted to hear from him. An apology, an explanation, maybe just a simple, "I'm sorry, Dad." But my phone stayed quiet. That night, I'd sit in the living room, lights dimmed, flipping through old photo albums. Margaret smiled in every picture, felt like she was watching me, reminding me to stay kind, patient, steady. But patience has a way of wearing thin when it's filled with unanswered questions. The days got colder. New York winters have a way of humbling you. Sharp winds that bite through even the thickest jacket. Skies that forget what color blue looks like. I'd spend mornings sweeping the porch, tightening the loose railing, just keeping busy. Neighbors waved. Some asked about the "for sale" sign being gone. I just said, "Changed my mind." They nodded politely, probably thinking it was an old man thing. Getting sentimental. Maybe they were right. One afternoon a letter came in the mail. No return address, just my name in Daniel's handwriting. I stood at the counter, staring at it for a long time before I opened it. Inside was a single page, short, careful words. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought I was helping. I didn't realize how much that house means to you. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I hope you can someday. Love, Daniel. I read it twice, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something in my chest loosen. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something close. I folded the letter neatly and placed it inside Margaret's old jewelry box. She always said forgiveness starts with keeping the door open, even just a little. The holidays came quietly. I bought a small tree from the market downtown. Nothing fancy, just enough to make the house smell like pine again. On Christmas Eve, I made myself dinner. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, the same meal Margaret used to cook. I set 2 plates out of habit, then laughed softly to myself. Old habits die slow. Halfway through dinner I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, Daniel was standing there. No suit, no polished smile, just a coat, hands in his pockets, eyes uncertain. "Hey, Dad," he said quietly. I didn't say anything right away, just stepped aside. "Come in." We sat at the table. The silence stretched, but not like before. This time it wasn't cold, just hesitant. He looked around, taking in the decorations. "You still do the tree?" "Somebody's got to keep traditions alive," I said. He nodded, glancing down. "I drove by a few times. Didn't know if you'd want to see me." "I was wondering when you'd stop hiding behind that letter," I said with a small smile. That earned a weak chuckle from him. I deserved that. For a while we just talked. Small things first. Work, the city, the snowstorm coming next week. Then, eventually, the thing we'd both been circling around. "I really thought I was doing the right thing," he said, his voice low. "You were alone here, Dad. I just wanted you somewhere safer, closer to me." "I know," I said, "but you can't save someone by taking away what keeps them standing." He looked up. "I didn't mean to take it away." "I know that too," I said softly, "but meaning well and doing right aren't the same thing." He stayed that night. Slept in his old room, though he barely fit in the bed anymore. In the morning, I found him sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee, looking out at the street. "Still solid as a rock," he said, tapping the porch rail. I smiled. "Told you?" He handed me a folded piece of paper. "Here, I talked to a lawyer. I canceled the sale officially. You're the only name on the title again." I looked at it. The ink fresh. His signature underneath. Then I looked at him. "Thank you." He nodded. "I owed you that." We didn't say much else. Sometimes peace doesn't come with grand gestures. Just quiet mornings and words left unsaid. Months passed, and life found a rhythm again. Daniel visited more often. Not every week, but enough. Sometimes we'd fix things around the house. Sometimes we'd just sit, listening to the old radio, not saying much at all. One afternoon he brought over an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "An offer," he said. "A real one this time. Not for your house. For something else." I opened it. It was a brochure for a community garden project being built near the river. A place for families, retirees, kids to plant vegetables and flowers together. They're looking for volunteers to help design it, he said. "Figured you might want to be part of something new." I looked at the photo. Sunlight, green space, laughter, life. Then I looked back at him. "You really think I'd be good at that?" He smiled. "You built this house, Dad. I think you can build a garden." Spring came early that year. I joined the project, met new people, dug my hands into the dirt again. Funny how something as simple as planting a seed can remind you you're still growing, too. Daniel came by often to help. We didn't talk about the house much anymore. Didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't empty now. It was full of understanding. Sometimes we'd drive out to the river after working, sit on the hood of his car, watching the sunset over the skyline. He'd say, "You ever think Mom would have liked this?" And I'd smile. "She'd have loved it. You finally slowing down for once." Years later, people still walk by my house and say how well it's kept. They don't know its story, how close it came to being just another property on a list. Inside, the walls still carry laughter, grief, and everything in between. The porch still creaks. The floors still shine with that same sunlight I remember from before. And on the mantel, right beside Margaret's favorite photo, sits a framed picture of me and Daniel, standing in front of the community garden, holding shovels, smiling like we'd finally figured it out. Maybe we did, not perfectly, not fully, but enough. Enough to know that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what broke. It's about choosing to keep what's left standing. The neighborhood was buzzing that afternoon. Cars lined the curb, people walking up the driveway with polite smiles and cups of coffee in hand. John sat quietly behind the wheel for a long time. Before getting out, he could feel his heart's pounding. Not from anger this time, but from something deeper. Fear, maybe. Fear of seeing his life turned into a real estate listing. When he finally walked up the steps, he saw it. A bright white sign with bold blue letters. Open house, Sunday only, hosted by Michael Adams, realtor. He stood there, reading his son's name on the sign. For a moment he almost turned back, but he didn't. Inside, the air smelled different. No trace of his wife's perfume. Just lemon cleaner and fresh paint. The walls that once held framed family photos were now covered with generic art. The kind you buy in bulk to make a place look neutral. People were walking through his memories. A young couple laughed softly near the kitchen. A woman ran her hand across the countertop he'd installed himself 30 years ago. Someone whispered, "It's got such good bones." John clenched his jaw and looked around. Then, from across the room, he saw him. Michael, his son, stood by the window, wearing a sleek navy suit, hair slicked back, phone in hand. He looked confident, older somehow, like he belonged in this new world of open houses and property deals. "Dad," Michael froze mid-sentence when he saw him. John didn't move. He just looked around, slowly, as if inspecting the place. "It's a nice house," John said, his voice even, calm. "Yeah, it's..." Michael's voice cracked out a little. "Yeah, it is." There was a pause, long enough for the people nearby to sense the tension. Someone quietly walked toward the door, pretending to check their phone. John looked back at his son. "You painted over the study." Michael swallowed. "Buyers like brighter colors, Dad. The dark wood made it look smaller." John nodded once. "Right, brighter, easier to sell." The words hung between them like dust in sunlight. Then Michael said quietly, "Dad, let's talk outside, okay?" They stood on the driveway, facing away from the people still walking through the home. Michael spoke first. "Dad, I didn't mean to hurt you. You aren't living here anymore, and the taxes were killing us. I thought maybe you thought you'd make a decision for me." John's tone was still calm, but it cut deep. "I thought I was helping," Michael said. "You were always talking about downsizing, about getting away from the city." "That wasn't your choice to make," John interrupted softly. "You don't sell a man's memories without asking if he's ready to let them go." Michael's shoulders dropped. He looked away, toward the house. "I just wanted to fix things. After Mom died, I thought if I could take care of everything, you'd be proud of me." John looked at him for a long time. "I was always proud of you, But this, he gestured toward the house. The strangers, the sign, the noise. This isn't what your mother would have wanted. Michael's voice cracked. I know. A long silence followed, the kind that makes you hear every passing car, every distant bird. Then John did something unexpected. He smiled faintly. So, what's the asking price? Michael blinked. What? John stepped closer, calm as ever. How much are you selling it for? A week later, John sat in his pickup truck across the street from the auction house. The morning air was cold, a thin fog rising off the asphalt, the kind that blurs the world just enough to make you think you're walking through a dream. The house, his house, had been stripped bare. Every room empty, every echo amplified. The last time he was inside, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a memory being boxed up and sold to the highest bidder. John had made a decision, not out of anger, but out of something quieter, something steady. He wasn't going to yell or fight. He was simply going to take back what was his. He watched as people arrived. Investors, couples, agents, curious neighbors, all of them with clipboards, phones, confident smiles. And then he saw Michael, standing by the front steps, greeting everyone, trying to look composed, but his eyes darted nervously at every car that pulled up. John waited until the auctioneer, a tall man in a tan suit, called everyone to gather. Then he stepped out of the truck. His boots crunched against the gravel, heads turned slightly, but no one recognized him. Not really. To them, he was just another potential buyer. He walked up slowly, hands in his jacket pockets, and took a place in the back of the crowd. The auctioneer began his routine patter. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is a rare opportunity. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, original build, strong foundation, excellent location, just 15 minutes from downtown. Let's open the bidding at $450,000. Someone immediately raised a hand. $450. Another voice jumped in. $475. The numbers rose, sharp and quick, like gunfire. Michael stood off to the side, watching closely, his jaw tight. His father's face were still hidden behind the crowd. $500,000. Someone shouted. $510. $520. John waited, listening to the rhythm, the tension. Then, when the moment dipped, he lifted his hand. $550,000. He said calmly. The crowd shifted slightly, people turning toward the voice. The auctioneer smiled. We've got $550. Do I hear $560? Michael's eyes scanned the group, then froze. He recognized that voice. Dad, he whispered under his breath. John didn't look his way. He just kept his gaze on the house. The same house where he'd taught Michael to ride a bike, where they'd eaten breakfast every Sunday, where his wife's laughter once filled the air like music. Another bidder jumped in. $570. John raised his hand again. $600. There was a murmur through the crowd now. The bids slowed. The auctioneer grinned, sensing a good story brewing. $600,000. Going once, going twice. $610. A woman called from the front. John's eyes narrowed slightly. $650. The crowd went quiet. Even the auctioneer hesitated for a split second. $650,000. Going once. Going twice. Sold. The gavel came down like a heartbeat. Michael stood frozen, watching his father step forward, pull a check envelope from his jacket, and hand it to the auctioneer. The man smiled. Congratulations, sir. You just bought yourself a fine home. John finally turned to face his son. Didn't want it to go to strangers. He said softly. Michael's lips trembled. He looked like he wanted to say something. Maybe thank you, maybe I'm sorry. But all that came out was a shaky breath. Dad, why? John glanced at the house, because your mother would have hated the idea of me letting go without a fight." He walked past him, toward the front door. No anger, no gloating, just quiet resolve. Michael stood there, watching as his father disappeared inside. The man who had just bought back the home his own son sold. The house was empty when I stepped inside again. The walls echoed with a silence I hadn't heard in years. Funny how silence can hold memories. The creak in the hallway where Michael used to run. The faint hum of the old refrigerator. The sunlight that still hit the kitchen counter at the exact same angle every morning. I set my keys down on the table and took a long breath. The air smelled faintly of dust and paint, like something new trying to cover up something old. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired of fighting the past, tired of losing people I loved to pride and misunderstanding. That night, I didn't unpack much, just a blanket, a pillow, and a photo frame. The one of my wife sitting on the porch, coffee in hand, smiling at me like she still knew something I didn't. I sat on that same porch for hours, listening to the quiet hum of the suburbs. Cars passed now and then, distant laughter from somewhere down the street, a dog barking. Life just kept moving, like it always does, whether we're ready or not. The next morning, someone knocked on the door. It was Michael. He stood there, wearing that same suit from the auction, but this time, he looked smaller somehow, not in height, in spirit. He didn't say a word at first, just looked past me, into the house. I could tell he'd forgotten how to stand in that doorway, forgotten how this place used to feel. "Morning," I said quietly. He nodded. "Morning." For a moment we both stood there, the distance between us louder than any argument we'd ever had. He finally spoke. "Dad, I didn't mean to disrespect you. I thought you didn't care about the house anymore." I smiled faintly. "Son, it was never about the house. It was about what it meant." He lowered his head. "I needed the money. I made a mistake. I thought I could fix everything on my own." "Yeah," I said, still calm. "I used to think that way, too." He looked up confused. "I did once. When your mother got sick, I didn't tell anyone how scared I was, thought I could handle it, thought asking for help made me weak." I paused. "Guess you got that from me." Michael's eyes filled, and he nodded slowly. "I just wanted to make you proud." I looked out at the yard. The grass was longer than it used to be. The wind brushed through the trees, scattering small leaves across the porch. "You don't have to sell anything to make me proud," I said softly. "Just learn to stay. That's the harder thing to do." He didn't answer, but I saw something change in his face. That small, quiet understanding that only comes after you've lost something you didn't mean to lose. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just stood there. Two men learning how to talk again after too many years of silence. When he left, I watched him walk down the driveway, sunlight cutting across his shoulders, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something like peace, not the kind that fixes everything, just the kind that lets you breathe again. The house never felt the same after that, but maybe that was the point. Maybe homes aren't meant to stay frozen in time. Maybe they grow older with us, losing paint, losing people, gaining silence. Still, I stayed. I spent the next few weeks cleaning, fixing, patching up the little things Michael had overlooked, the loose railing by the porch steps, the flickering light in the kitchen, the leaky faucet that had been dripping since before he was born. Every hammer tap, every brush stroke, felt like stitching a wound that would never quite close. But at least it wouldn't bleed anymore. I found old photographs while unpacking. Ones I hadn't seen in years. Michael as a boy, missing a front tooth, holding a baseball bat too big for his hands. My wife standing beside him, the sun catching her hair just right. And then there was one of me, holding both of them close, looking like a man who thought time was endless. I sat there for a long time that night, looking at those faces that used to fill this house with noise and laughter. It's strange how the mind remembers sounds, even when the ears don't hear them anymore. The echo of a child running down the hall, the clatter of breakfast plates, the sound of her voice calling my name from the other room. That's what homes really are. Sound memories. You lose the people, but the echoes stay. A few days later, I saw Michael again. He came by unannounced, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I figured you might like one," he said. I nodded, smiled a little. "Still the same kind?" "Yeah. I remember you always liked it black." He handed it over and sat beside me on the porch. For a while we didn't say anything, just watched the cars go by. He told me about work, how hard it's been since the housing crash, how he's trying to rebuild, start smaller this time. "I'm not sure what I'm doing anymore," he admitted. "I just keep moving." "That's life," I said. "Half of it's pretending you know where you're headed." He laughed quietly. "Yeah, I guess you're right." There was something softer in him now. The sharpness was gone. The arrogance that used to coat every word had faded into something humbler, something human. Before he left, he said, "Dad, I want to make this right. I don't know how, but I'll find a way." I looked at him and said, "You already did." He frowned, confused, but I meant it. Sometimes making things right doesn't mean fixing what's broken. It just means showing up again. After he left, I walked through the rooms once more. The light poured in through the windows, hitting the dust in the air like golden snow. I could almost hear my wife's laughter in the kitchen, almost, and for the first time in years, I whispered, "I'm home." Time didn't fix us, it just softened the edges. Weeks turned into months, and somewhere between the coffee visits and the quiet conversations, Michael and I began to rebuild something that didn't have a name anymore. Not quite family, not quite forgiveness. Just something honest. He started stopping by every Sunday. Sometimes he'd bring groceries. Other times just his laptop, saying he needed a change of scenery. He'd sit by the kitchen table, working on his real estate listings while I cooked breakfast. The sound of typing replaced the silence I'd grown used to. It wasn't laughter, but it was life. And that was enough for me. One morning he showed up with a small box. "Thought you might like this," he said, handing it over. Inside was a photo frame. It was one of those digital ones that plays a slideshow. The first image that appeared was the picture I'd kept on the porch. My wife, smiling. Then came others. Old family photos I hadn't seen in decades. Ones Michael had scanned himself. I didn't say anything for a while. I just watched the screen flicker between memories. Finally I said, "You've been going through the old albums." He nodded. "Yeah, Mom kept everything, even the bad ones." He laughed. "There's one of me crying because you wouldn't buy me that toy truck." I chuckled. "Yeah, I remember. You threw quite the tantrum that day." He smiled faintly. "Guess I've always had a hard time letting go of things I wanted." There was a pause between us. Not awkward, just thoughtful. I said quietly, "Sometimes the things we lose teach us what really matters." He looked at me. "You mean the house?" I shook my head. "No, I mean people." The room went still after that. The kind of stillness that doesn't need filling. He reached over, rested his hand briefly on mine. Not for long, just enough. That's how healing works, I guess. Not through grand gestures or tearful apologies, but through small things. A cup of coffee, a photo frame, a shared silence. Tiny moments that build something new out of what was broken. As fall rolled in, the trees around the neighborhood turned amber and red. I'd sit on the porch every evening, watching the leaves drift down. Sometimes Michael joined me, sometimes he didn't. Either way, I found peace in the rhythm of the season. The slow, graceful way everything lets go when it's time. One night, as the sky turned orange over the rooftops, Michael said, "Dad, I've been thinking of moving closer, maybe back into the neighborhood." I smiled. "You sure you can handle living near your old man again?" He laughed. "I think I can manage." It wasn't a promise, just a possibility, but it was enough to make the future seem a little less empty. And that's how it went. A season of small things, quiet repairs, and steady forgiveness. No dramatic endings, no perfect resolutions, just two people learning how to stay when it would have been easier to walk away. Winter came early that year, the kind that paints the world in shades of gray and makes every sound softer. Like life itself decided to whisper for a while. Snow blanketed the street outside. The trees stood bare, their branches drawn thin against the sky. Inside, the house creaked gently under the cold, like it was sighing in its sleep. Michael had moved just 10 minutes away by then. He'd visit every few days, bringing takeout or just checking in to shovel the driveway. Each time, he'd ask the same thing. "You need anything, Dad?" And each time I'd tell him, "Just your company." It became a small ritual. Him showing up with snow on his jacket, me waiting by the porch light like clockwork. We didn't talk much about the past anymore. It wasn't that we forgot. We just stopped reopening old wounds to check if they'd healed. One night, he came by after work. His face looked tired, but his eyes carried a kind of quiet focus I hadn't seen before. "Dad," he said, setting a folder on the table, "I've been working on something." I opened it. Plans, sketches, and photographs. A small neighborhood project, affordable homes for young families. His company's first solo development since the market crash. "It's nothing big," he said, "but I want it to mean something." I studied the drawings, tracing my finger over the lines of one house in particular. "This one looks familiar." He smiled. "It's based on ours, the original layout." I thought, maybe I could build something that feels like home for other people. For a moment I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, really looked. The boy who once sold his father's house was now designing homes for others to build their lives in. Sometimes life has a sense of irony that even time can't soften. "I think your mother would have liked that," I said quietly. He nodded, his eyes glinting. "I hope so." Later that night, after he left, I sat by the window and watched the snow fall. It came down steady, blanketing everything in silence. The streetlights turned it into 1,000 tiny sparks, drifting slowly toward the ground. And in that stillness I felt her again. My wife, not like a ghost or a vision, but like warmth, a presence in the air, a whisper that said, "You did your best." I smiled, whispering back, "I know, he's doing his best, too." The next morning I found something small on the porch, a coffee cup, left by Michael. On it, written in permanent marker, were 3 words, "For old times." I held that cup like it was something sacred. It wasn't about the coffee, it was about everything that cup meant. Forgiveness, love, memory, and time that somehow found its way back home. A few weeks after that snowstorm, I decided to clean out the attic. It wasn't because I had to. I just felt like it was time, the kind of time that sneaks up on you after years of putting things off. The attic hadn't changed much. The same wooden beams, the same faint smell of cedar and dust. I pulled the chain on the light bulb, and a soft yellow glow spread across old boxes and furniture covered in sheets. Each one held a piece of a life I thought I'd already lived. Baby clothes, school projects, an old radio that hadn't worked since the 90s, and then I found it. A small wooden box, tucked behind an old trunk. Inside, neatly folded, was a letter. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting unmistakable. It was hers, my wife's. The envelope had my name on it. No date, no explanation. Just John, written in the careful looping way she always wrote when she wanted me to slow down and read every word. I sat down on an old chair, the kind that creaks in all the right ways, and I opened it. Her words were gentle, honest, the kind that carried warmth even through the years. John, if you're reading this, it means time has moved farther than I could. Don't be sad, love. That's just how life works. We build, we lose, we rebuild again. Promise me something. Don't let the house die with me. It's not just walls and rooms. It's every version of us that ever lived here. Every morning, every laugh, every fight we managed to forgive. And when the day comes that you think about leaving, don't. Stay long enough to see what still grows after the storm. One day Michael will understand you. He has your stubbornness, your heart, your silence. It'll take him time, but he'll come home. When he does, let him in. Don't let pride stand where love used to live. I love you. Always have, always will. Claire, I don't remember how long I sat there. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. All I know is that when I finally folded the letter back into the envelope, the attic didn't feel cold anymore. I looked around and realized she was right. The house had seen every version of us. The young couple dreaming too big. The tired parents trying their best. The widower learning to live alone. And now, the father finding his son again. That night, I put the letter in a frame and hung it in the hallway, right where the light hits it in the morning. The next day, when Michael came over, he noticed it. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at his mother's handwriting. Then he whispered, "She always knew how to say the right thing." I nodded. "Yeah, she still does." He smiled, and for a second, I saw that little boy again, the one who used to race down this hallway, laughing until his face turned red. And for the first time in years, I laughed too, a quiet, honest laugh that felt like coming home. Winter finally loosened its grip. The air changed first. Softer, warmer, carrying that faint smell of wet soil and new beginnings. The snow melted in slow patches, revealing the dull green beneath, and for the first time in years, I found myself standing on the porch without a coat, watching the world thaw. Michael started coming by more often, not out of duty this time, but because he wanted to. Some evenings we'd sit outside, 2 mugs of coffee between us, the sun dipping low behind the trees. We didn't talk much, didn't have to. It was enough to share the silence again. He told me about work, how he'd started volunteering at the local youth center, teaching kids about mechanics and fixing up old bikes. He said it helped him sleep better, said it made him feel useful again, and I couldn't help but smile, because that's exactly the kind of thing his mother would have done. I spent most days in the garden. It had been years since I'd cared for it properly, but I remembered her ways, how she always said, "Plants don't need much, just attention." So I gave them that, one morning at a time. The soil was stubborn at first, frozen deep down, but it loosened, just like my heart eventually did. And then, something beautiful happened. The lilies she planted all those years ago bloomed again. I didn't even know the roots had survived all this time, but there they were, white and bright against the dirt, like little pieces of sunlight. Michael noticed them one afternoon and said, "She'd be proud of you, Dad." I wanted to tell him that it wasn't pride I felt. It was peace. A kind of quiet I'd been chasing for years but could never quite reach. Now it found me, in the simplest things. A flower, a cup of coffee, a shared laugh that didn't need explaining. That spring, we fixed the old bench by the maple tree, the same bench where she used to read her novels and hum softly under her breath. We sanded the wood, repainted the legs, and when we finished, Michael carved a small word on the backrest. Home. I didn't ask him why. I didn't have to, because standing there, with the sun warm on our faces and the smell of earth rising from the ground, I realized something. You never really lose the people you love. They just find new ways to stay. Through letters, through laughter, through the garden that blooms again, even after the longest winter. Time has a strange way of folding in on itself. One day you're chasing deadlines and fixing leaky faucets, and the next, you're sitting by the window, watching life happen like a quiet play outside. The years that followed were calm, not empty, just softer. The kind of quiet that hums rather than echoes. Michael got married 2 years after that spring. A simple ceremony in a small church outside the city. I remember standing there watching him in his suit, thinking how fast it all went. He'd found someone steady, someone kind, a school teacher with the kind of smile that reminded me of the mornings I used to wake up next to his mother. They moved to a suburb about 20 minutes away, not far, but far enough that the house started feeling a little bigger every time they left. Still, he visited often, sometimes alone, sometimes with his wife, and later, with a small child who called me Grandpa before he even learned how to say his own name right. His name's Eli. Bright kid, always curious. He runs through the garden the same way Michael used to, chasing butterflies and pretending the maple tree is a rocket ship. When I watch him, I feel something I didn't expect. Not just love, but relief. Because maybe all the mistakes I made didn't end with me. Maybe they softened into something better, passed down in gentler hands. I kept the same routines. Early mornings with black coffee, the radio humming old jazz through the kitchen, a walk to the park every Sunday, where I'd feed breadcrumbs to the ducks and nod at the same old man who always wore that too big hat. Sometimes I'd see faces that reminded me of her. A stranger at the grocery store, a woman laughing too loudly at a cafe. It didn't hurt the way it used to. Grief had turned into something quieter, something like gratitude. She wasn't gone. Not really. She was in the sound of rain on the porch roof, in the warmth of the morning sun through the curtains, in the echo of laughter down the hallway. The house, my old house, had changed too. Michael helped me fix the plumbing one summer, then painted the living room walls a soft beige. More light, he said, and he was right. The place felt new again, lived in but peaceful. We hung a few family pictures, not for decoration, but for memory. Her photo stayed above the fireplace, same as always. Every time I passed it, I'd give it a small nod, like an old habit I never quite let go. People in town started recognizing me less. That's how time works. It replaces you slowly, like waves reshaping the shore. And I didn't mind, because somewhere in that quiet fading, I found peace in being part of something larger. something that continued after me. One night, after dinner with Michael's family, Eli climbed onto my lap and said, "Grandpa, why do you always smile when you look at the garden?" I told him, "Because it reminds me that everything comes back, even after it's gone." He didn't understand. Not yet, but one day he will.